Hello, welcome back to Math Time with Professor Prime, and I'm your host as always, Professor Prime. So, today we're going to talk about math and Doc Martin. For the uninitiated, Doc Martin is a comedy, a medical comedy, a British medical comedy that took place over the course of 10 seasons, aka 10 series, for around 80 episodes over the course of 18 years. So nearly 2 decades. That's insane. And it's quality television. I dig it. I dig it hard. And it's one of those shows that I was able to watch with my family, like, periodically, is we discovered and caught up to where it was, and then eventually as new seasons came out, right? So I dig it. And so here's how the video is going to go. I'm going to talk about Doc Martin. I'm going to talk about the math within that show, like within universe, which, I mean, in some ways is going to be very similar to like out of universe. But then I'm also going to talk about math in the meta sense. Some of that will just be kind of blended together as we go. And I'm also going to talk about my feelings towards the show, which, like, I enjoyed it, so I want to get into why. I will try to remain light on spoilers, but I also do not wish to hold back. So please assume that there are spoilers ahead. With that in mind, let's get into it. So with Doc Martin, I find it fascinating, right? Because like one, just on that meta level, like there's a lot of math in the comedy, right? And we'll get into that. But within universe, math functions how it functions in the real world, right? Like math is everywhere and in everything, and it is everything. And I feel like some of the ways that you can explicitly see that, um, are like in a lot of STEM fields, right? And certain things like gaming in real life, and right. Well, as far as like STEM goes, like the medicine field, oh my god, definitely you can see the math being in that and how it's being used. Like okay, so one, like you have like Doc Martin, and like who the story focuses on is he ends up in a small like seaside village called Portland, and the people who he meets along the way. Now, for context, um, he used to visit Portland when he was a kid, like during summers and stuff like that. And we'll get into that a little bit, but the whole thing is like, right, so he's in this seaside town, and he went from being a surgeon, there's definitely math in that, to being their GP, right, a general practitioner, right. He has his own like surgery slash office, and it's interesting to see like the terms that get used in the show and how they differ with the U.S. But my whole thing is that so throughout the series, we see him analyzing patients and figuring out their problems, and because he might be like looking at different parts of their body and seeing if there's any like discoloration, or it's like, hey, is this discolored, or like, hey, is this red or is something blue? But the whole thing is he's looking at different parts of the body. He's looking at the colors of the body parts. There's a better way to say that, but the whole thing is like, right, he's looking to see if anything is abnormal. We live in a universe of shapes and of motion, and with medicine, one of the things you could be looking at is like just on that base level. It's like, are there any differences physically that we can see? And then it's just like, well, what can we see internally, right? Like, can we figure out about that, right? And it's like, hey, we might test their temperature, we might test their blood levels, their urine levels. We might be testing these different things to see what's in the body, see what's normal, see what's not. So we have these different metrics to figure out what could be wrong, right? And so with the doc, he's looking at all these patients and he's trying to figure out what's wrong. And in the episode, there's usually something that a character does that's going to come back later on and cause a health problem. And so, but my whole thing is like, right, in the real world, right, like with medicine, we're testing different things to see what could be wrong with the body. We're also like seeing like, oh, well, does this person have that symptom? Do they have that symptom? Right? We're looking at things externally. We're looking at things internally, and it's all math. It's all information. It's all a way for us to like say something about like individual based on things that we figured out about diseases and people as a whole. And so we have this large mountain of you know information that can be used to diagnose this person or that person. So not only do you have instruments, I'm sorry, this is late. So not only do you have math and like the diagnoses, I'm struggling. Right. So you not only have the math in diagnosing the patients, right? You have math in the instruments that are used and what everything is indicating, and then you have the cost of this and the cost of that. Um, and a lot of other things. And then you have like the town of Portland, and we have people running different businesses, handling different things monetarily, providing different services like goods and services to different people. And there's math in how this town like runs in its economy. And then it's a seaside village, and it's gonna be far from some large hospital. So like that ends up being a factor in some things like later on, right? And like, hey, how can we get like someone who needs like emergency level help to someone quickly? Like, how long do we have for this and that? And there's always like a big thing with timing and a lot of the episodes and how they function and how they flow. And like I mentioned before, there's usually something that happens in the episode that someone does that's gonna cause like a health problem later, and so it's like cool to see that unfold. Um, and then just like on a more meta level, like kind of continuing that trend, there's math in the comedy. The comedy comes in many forms. And that show, surprisingly, a decent amount of slapstick that they I think do pretty decently. But like when you come and you think of a joke, it's like you have the punchline plus the setup, and that equals the joke, right? Or sorry, the setup plus the punchline, and that equals the joke. You can get subversive with that. You can play around with the order. You can have it be like multiple parts, and they can come to you like you know through your words. It can come through you visually. It can come through in a lot of different ways. But that idea is there. It's something that's inherently mathematical, right? You have like the basic setup for a joke, and you have the delivery, right? You have the timing, so you're adding all that up to just have some comedy. And Doc Martin, like some of it, like I said, is like slapstick. So you have a lot of physical comedy, and there's math all over that, and not just in the setup of the joke, but getting across that particular style of humor. Because like in universe, you might have this person, that person, in this position, that position, this angle, that angle. They're doing thing A, they're doing thing B, and then bam, that leads to the next thing. But that also had to be very deliberate from a meta sense, and so that's interesting, right? Because they had to put together this thing or that thing, and put this actor or that actor in this position, that position, doing this thing and that thing, and have that all lead to the desired results, right? And then there's also math in the lighting, the sounds, the music, the actors, their motions, their angles, the positions that they take, their breathing, their voices, and how they're choosing to speak to one another. Right? Because it's like, hey, you're looking at things like how fast they're talking, how loud they're talking, their particular styles. So it all comes together, and it's like fascinating because that's all math, and just like not only just math and everything I just said, but then in a broader scope because there's math and color, math and sound, and how these things are used across the way. And it's just, yeah, it's fun to show. And so I could talk about like that longer, but I wanted to talk about how I feel about the show more. It's like it's a really like interesting show because there are a lot of funny moments, but there are a lot of hard hitting moments too. And some of that humor that you see throughout the show comes through like oftentimes Martin's reactions to the people of Portland and their problems. And he's like a very like no nonsense kind of guy, you know. And I appreciate how he says yes in that show because when he doesn't feel like dealing with nonsense, he's just not gonna like elaborate. You might say stuff. Oh, is this thing happening? He's like, yes, and it's like, yeah, okay, that's fair. But yeah, so I like a lot of the characters. And like I said earlier, spoilers here because I didn't want to get into anything too plot heavy, but I do want to talk about a few things because like throughout the course of the series, I do like how Martin and Louisa, or as a lot of people in Portland say, Louisa. I like Martin and like Louisa's relationship. They get each other and they work. And I'm not big on like romance and comedies, but because most of the time it sucks. But like they work. They both have horrific past, and they both get each other in a way I think that other people don't get them. So I think that's kind of cool. And like overall, you have this like huge cast of characters that you get to know over the course of these like 10 seasons slash series. And could you imagine what it must have been like being on a set? Because you have some people like that come and go, right? Or some people got replaced because one thing happened or another thing happened, right? Some people left, some people died. But for nearly 20 years, right? You're working with largely the same amount of people, or same people, right? And so it's like, could you imagine that? And seeing this story unfold for a considerable chunk of your life. That's wild to me. That's cool. And so like I liked how a lot turned out for Dr. Martin. It's a great show. If you haven't seen it, you should check it out because it's like a lot of times it's like really funny, and sometimes like I said it can be hard hitting, and that can like work for it, and it just like it feels good, you know. And I enjoy like the scenery, like because like Portland isn't a real like place, but or at least in a conventional sense. But it's like filmed somewhere in the UK, right? Like there's a seaside village that they go to and they film that, and it looks beautiful. So yeah, I want to see if there's anything else I wanted to talk about Dr. Martin. It's like it's a good show. I'm not sure how many people are aware that it exists, but if you have seen it, feel free to talk about it. If you haven't seen it, but yeah, I recommend it.